Okay, I found this stone. Now I want to make it into paint. But how the heck am I supposed to do that? Well, listen up. Let's start from the beginning. We're going to start from a rock that you find outside to a paint. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my general process, and then I'm going to go into more details in other videos. But basically, the process is you want to try to find stones that are either already quite small or stones that you're going to be willing to smash a bunch of times to make them even smaller. I started out with a little bit of a harder stone, and so I ended up going for gravel. So I had gone on a bike ride, and then I had just collected gravel in a little tin. There was a nice purple tone to the rocks, so I really got excited about thinking about how that could be incorporated into my paintings of nature. So my process of going through this was I dropped all of those into the mortar and pestle. And then I started going around and grinding it down to as fine of powder as I possibly could. What I then did was I had taken just things that I had around my house. So I used a like bacon splatter sort of thing as a sieve and dumped the stones onto the top. And obviously I had started grinding it, so there was going to be some finer powder in there. This is just to start getting a general gist of, okay, there has to be a little bit of powder in there. Ah, perfect. So kind of saw how that was going, then put that powder back into the mortar and pestle so I wasn't having to work from those larger stones and really start to grind down and spend a ton of time really compressing that. I ended up doing this process several times. So going through that same strainer and kind of just getting it as fine as possible. So really just little steps. So not seeing, this big stone and being like, okay, this has to be paint. But seeing it as these small steps to getting to, smaller rocks, to even smaller, to then it's starting to actually resemble powder, to then feeling like it looks almost like the when you have like powdered makeup. That's the level of powder that you want it to be. You want it to be as fine as is humanly possible for your little human hands to do. And the only way to really do that is with a mortar and pestle and through trying and going through it a bunch of times. Now, the thing that I did not know going in the first time was that I would want to try a technique where you actually add the thinnest powder that you possibly can to some water. And I had tried making it into paint the first time. It didn't really work out very well. But that's why I want to make these videos, because I feel like people that are interested in making paint or just want to kind of learn about the process because it's so cool, aren't a ton of resources. I spend a lot of time on the internet trying to find videos like what I'm making right now, trying to see, okay, who's making videos about making paint from rocks and then turning it into acrylic paint. And I found some general videos, but nothing that really gave step by step. So I'm excited to be able to provide that in this series of videos that I'm making. So I've clearly ground down a bunch of times and made it into a nice fine powder, the finest that I can possibly do with my mortar and pestle. And so what I'm going to do is a technique where you're going to actually add water and take the finest particles that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a little jar that has a lid, and I'm going to put about 1 part of the powder and 2 parts of water into the jar. Then I'm going to shake it vigorously for a minute. This is going to allow for the lighter particles to rise to the top and the heavier to the bottom. The heavier ones are going to be the ones that are going to make a really gritty paint, while the ones on the top are going to be making a thinner powder, which is going to then make an easier to work with paint. So then I'm going to pour out the water, essentially, that's on the top that has that light powder in it, into a separate jar. I'll separate the jars and put them next to a windowsill. Then I let the sun do its job and let the water evaporate from both of them, leaving me with two different types of powder. One is the more gritty that was from the bottom, and then the other from the top is going to be the finest powder that I can make. You can do this process multiple times to get the finest powder possible, but that is the general process of how to do it. Then you can kind of chip that out and see that that's a powder. That's going to be able to be what you make into your paints. I would suggest at this point grinding it down just that one more time, just because it is going to be this weird kind of clumpy powder again, and you want to make sure it's as smooth as possible for when you make it into your paint. I'm going to make another video that shares how to make this powder into actual acrylic paint that is usable and workable. But I'm so excited to share this process with you guys because I wanted to make paint for so long and it just seemed a little bit unapproachable. But you know what? You can only learn until you try, and I've already made a lot of mistakes and I've already learned a lot. So I'm excited to start this painting series with you guys, and hopefully it'll add some ease to your paint making experience. If you want to find out more, visit my website at jdtmaker.com, where I offer my paintings, my handbound journals, arts healing and art lessons with me online and in person. Happy making!